A special DCC members meeting will be after church on Sunday, June 22nd, sorry. It says DCC members only. That's not true. Everybody's welcome to come. It's my first special meeting that we've called in 12 years. The time has come for me to retire. So, most of you don't know it, but I'm getting sicker pretty quick. And the doctors have said it's time to step down. So at that meeting, I will give you more details. Nancy and I will. And also the elders will tell you what their plan is. I don't know what it is. I'm not involved in those discussions. But we couldn't surprise you at the August meeting because this is going to impact the ministry plan and the budget and everything that the members are going to vote for. So we talked about it and said we have to bring it to your attention. But that time has come. So I would invite all of you to come June 22nd, and you get to hear, and so will I, what my future looks like. So you could be praying for me. I now have more procedures and another surgery coming up. This is like number 15 or 16. And so it's time to get to lower altitude where I can breathe. So apparently there's not much oxygen up here as I'm finding out. So, okay. So we're in Numbers. Nancy is the one that gave me the title today for the sermon. I was joking with her. I don't know if those of you that are basketball fans, when the Dallas Mavericks drafted Jason Kidd, okay, now you have to think about this for it to be funny. Jason said that he's so excited that we're going to turn this team around 360 degrees. I think what he meant is 180. So we're heading this direction. We're going to turn it 360 and keep heading in that direction. It's one of the quips that has survived the media because it's so funny what he said. I don't think you realize it. So this is the whole topic of Numbers 14. We're going to turn around this nation around 360 degrees. So you know the story. It's pretty simple. God said there's a promised land, go into it, and they said no. So God says, okay, we'll look at some of the details in just a second. Okay, well, guess what? Then you're going to wander for 40 years. Oh, okay, well, then we're going to go. So they go this way. Now they're going back. Now they turn around and go. But now they're doing it without God's blessing. So not doing it in sin. So they sinned the first time by not going when he told them to, and they sinned the second time by going when he told them not to. Okay? That's why I thought it was a great title when I shared that with Nancy. She goes, well, there's your sermon title right there. They're still wanting to do their own thing, moving ahead. So we're going to spend some time in Numbers chapter 14. But let me remind you where we are in Numbers. It's Numbers is, hopefully you're figuring it out by listening to us. It's a fascinating book. It just is. It's a fascinating book. The Hebrew title, In the Desert, in the Wilderness, and every one of us has been in the desert. I mean, it's so appropriate for who we are as people, okay? So they spent, 13 months at the base of Mount Sinai, learning about the history, Genesis and Exodus, learning about Leviticus, what God desires. And you may remember, I put Numbers in a wedding context, and so Exodus is the engagement, the betrothal. If you obey me, I will make you a kingdom of priests, a holy nation. Out of all the world, you'll be my prized possession. And they said, all that the Lord has said, we will do. I love it. Okay? That's Exodus. Then you get to Leviticus, where he lays out, we've already gone through Leviticus 3 years ago. He lays out, here's what he desires in the relationship. Leviticus is all about the relationship with him and with each other. There's nothing like this law code anywhere in an ancient world. Nothing. Okay? There's no way we can describe how powerful the Mosaic Law was to shift world history in a completely different direction. In every other law code, the laws protected the men, but not in the Mosaic Law. In the Mosaic Law, the law controlled the men to protect those that had no rights. Women, wives, prostitutes, virgins, children, animals, creation. When you go into the land, let the land rest every 7 years. Okay? When you go into the land, don't eat the fruit for the first year. Let the trees, let them replenish. A righteous person takes care of their animals. So what the Mosaic Law does, which is counter to every other law code, is that it establishes dignity. It reestablishes what we had in the beginning in the garden by protecting those who had no rights. Okay? Everywhere you turn. So Leviticus is absolutely a fabulous study in human rights and dignity. So that's Leviticus. So we have the engagement, Exodus. Then we have the vows that are made. Here's the promises that we're making. Okay, we are going to take care of each other. We are going to take care of the poor. We're going to take care of our widows and orphans. We're going to take care of the foreigners that come in. Those are the vows. And then when you get to Numbers, now you're into the marriage. Just like the desert. Okay? Some of you know what I'm talking about in your marriages. Our assistant pastor that was here when I got here, Mark Hill, used to say, been married 35 years, 27 of them happily. You see, that's Numbers. Life in the desert, okay? You've all been through it. And so this is what life is like now in a relationship with this God. So they've been sitting there for 13 months, maybe 14 months, learning all this, and they finally get up and go, okay? Pack their bags, and they go 3 days, and God says rest. And what do? Complain. They immediately start complaining. Not enough food, not enough water, They just go on and on and on. And you think they would learn their lesson, but they don't. So then, Miriam, I kind of put them a little bit out of order on purpose. Last week you heard Bill Spear. Thank you, Bill. Miriam and Aaron turned against Moses. So not only do you have the nations grumbling, you have the leadership grumbling and complaining. Okay? So then, that was in Numbers... excuse me. And then in Numbers 13, you have them go to the promised land, and they come back, the 12, and they said, oh, we can't go to the promised land. We have seen the Nephilim there. You know, and we talked about that 2 weeks ago, that was deceitful because all those people they say they saw were killed in the flood. None of them survived the flood. So these 10 of the 12, they didn't want to do it. And so they deceived the people with what they saw. Okay? All right. So Numbers chapter 13 ends with, we saw the Nephilim there, the descendants of Anak coming from Nephilim. We seemed like grasshoppers in their eyes, and we looked the same to them. Okay, that's how it ends, 13. Really? And that's just pure old-fashioned deceit, because that tribe was gone long as part of the flood, long before. So, what did the people do? Well, that's okay, our God is big. No, they don't do that. They like to complain. That night, chapter 14, verse 1, all the members of the community raised their voices and they wept. They cried all night. In verse 2, they conclude that God is their enemy. After all that's happened, the 10 plagues, right, where he destroyed the Egyptian gods, the 13 months of taking care of them in the desert, scorpions, snakes, no water, no food. He protects them. He provides a pillar of cloud for shade during the day. He's watching over them. He's taking care of them. Verse 2, all the Israelites grumbled against Moses and Aaron, and the whole assembly said to them, if only we had died in Egypt or in this wilderness. Wow. God is now the enemy. What he did was not good. And how many times have we talked as a church about when Paul says in Philippians 2, do all things without grumbling and complaining, then you will shine like stars in the night. Not before then. Why? Because when you grumble and complain, you're telling those around you that you really do not believe in the true sovereignty of God. You really don't believe it. Okay? People ask me all the time, they're kind of stuck on this sovereignty thing. Is he in control of everything? No, it just means he can be. He actually is in control either directly or indirectly. Theologians have fancy words for that. Otherwise, he wouldn't be God. So he decides things that are going to happen. It's all throughout the scriptures. We're going to see it today. Okay? Was the 40 years of wandering, was that a blessing or a curse? We're going to have some insight in that. You see, this passage, the story is easy to understand at one level, but boy, does it introduce some really thorny theological issues that we're going to address briefly. So, they grumbled against them. If only we had died in Egypt or in this wilderness. Verse 3, why is the Lord, see, he's the one that's at fault. Why is he bringing us to this land only to let us fall by the sword? Our wives and children will be taken as plunder. Wouldn't it be better for us to go back to Egypt? Huh. And they said to each other, we should choose a leader and go back to Egypt. Well, okay, in chapter 12, you think you would have learned the lesson of Miriam and Aaron, but they don't. So they're saying, well, we'll take matters into our own hands. They you just can't teach people sometimes. You can't fix stupid. All right? You can't. All as pastors in my classes, I have another class coming up in July in a doctoral program with these young pastors. You know what they all agree on? We tell our people, we teach them, and they don't listen. Yeah. If you really want to shine like stars in the night, train yourself not to complain. Quit complaining. And that is a huge mental exercise to learn how to do that. So, they're ready to go back. So Joshua argues very interestingly in chapter 14, verse 8. So he says, wait a minute. Okay. He tells them how good the land is in verse 8. If the Lord is pleased with us, he will lead us into that land, a land flowing with milk and honey, and he will give it to us. That means that this land is overflowing with blessing. Remember what he said? You're going to move into a land, you don't have to build houses, they're already built for you. You don't have to plant fruit trees, they're already planted. I've already taken care of all that. Okay? This land is a gift because you're my people, and you'll be blessed. Only do not rebel against the Lord, verse 9, and do not be afraid of the people of the land, because we will devour them. Why? Their protection is gone. Here's one of those theological knotty issues. Their protection is gone. What was their protection? Way back with Moses in Genesis 15, when God said, your descendants are going to inherit this land, I'm going to give it to them. God gets to choose. The earth is his. He gets to choose what you have. Do you realize that none of you are owners? Do you realize that? The Bible's really clear on that. You're stewards. And you'll be held accountable to what you do with what God does give you. You're stewards. You're to own nothing. You're a steward to what God does. So we talk about how much money you should give. I don't preach on it a lot. I always say thank you for being generous. And not often, a couple times a year, I'll say to you, I don't really know if you're generous or not. That's between you and the Lord. I can't define that. All I know is that from our perspective as staff and elders, you're very generous. You take care of us. You might give $5 and you might be worth $100 million. You might have to check your greed on that. You could be worth $50 and you might give 45 of them. Okay, now that's called sacrifice, generosity. I can't answer that question. Only you can. But what I can tell you with confidence all the way through the scriptures is that you're a steward, not an owner. So God said to Abraham, I'm going to give you this land. He said, how do I know that? And God said, this is Genesis 15, he said, I'm going to take your descendants out of the land, and I'm going to put them in a place where they're going to be mistreated. That's Egypt, for over 400 years. But don't worry, I'm going to bring them back. Okay, why would God do that? It's the very last verse. Because the sin of the Amorites or the Canaanites has not reached its full. They have not made the decision yet, are they going to follow God or not? So Paul says in Romans 1, they have all the information that we have. Okay? They have it. They deliberately suppress the truth in unrighteousness. Therefore, every human is without excuse. There's no excuse. This is the earliest version of what Jesus talked about, the unforgivable sin. To the Pharisees, you crossed the line. There's no going back now. So he gave them 450 years. After Solomon died and they had the Civil War and the nation split into the northern, southern kingdoms, God waited 150 years to send prophets to the northern kingdom. He's very patient. He gives a lot of space and a lot of data and information for you to look at and decide, are you going to pursue this God or not? And so the Canaanites had decided that It's no longer an option. They've made their decision. They're following all the other gods, but not the true God. And so just Joshua's arguments. Their protection is gone. God's no longer protecting them. Now we need to go in and take the land. So what do? You think they would listen to logic and go, oh, that's really great. No, they don't do that. So after Joshua, the whole assembly talked about stoning them. Verse 10. Then the glory of the Lord appeared at the tent of meeting to all the Israelites. You know, when I was a teenager growing up, I got in trouble, well, a lot. Okay? I was always in trouble. You can ask all 5 siblings. I was definitely the black sheep. My dad worked for the town. And every time I got in trouble for drugs, breaking and entering, all kinds of things, theft. And so every time the police showed up, the words I hated to hear, your dad's not going to be happy. I'd rather they throw me in jail, right? And this is what happened right here. God showed up. The glory of the Lord appeared at the tent of meeting. So, okay, what does he say? He accuses them of contempt. Verse 11. The Lord said to Moses, how long will these people treat me with contempt? How long will they refuse to believe in me, in spite of all the signs that I have performed among them? Remember, for 13 months, they've seen the 10 plagues. They saw him defeat the the Egyptian army. They saw him take care of everything. They've seen all this. Okay? He has protected them, given them food and water, watched out for them. And in spite of all the signs I have performed among them, I will strike them down with a plague and destroy them, but I will make you a nation greater and stronger than they. Okay, that sounds an awful lot like what happened at the golden calf incident. He said the same thing to Moses. So Moses, he gives a similar argument with a little bit of shift in it. Because the sub-narrative of all this is that Moses is growing in his leadership and his own theology. So he adds a little bit to his argument to God. The first thing he talks about is the strength that God has. Numbers 13, Moses said to the Lord, then the Egyptians will hear about it. By your power, your strength, you brought these people up from among them, and they will tell the inhabitants of this land about it. So, you brought them up by your strength, okay? And the Egyptians are going to laugh at you. All the nations are going to laugh at you if you destroy these people. That's a solid argument, because honestly, that is exposing one of the theological conundrums that you find all throughout the Scripture, is that God has his own character at stake everywhere he turns. Okay, when he decides to walk with you in faith, he's putting his own character on the line. I love Isaiah 42. He says to Israel in chapter 42, you are my witnesses, but you're deaf and blind. You're deaf. You don't listen when I talk. The prophets, you kill them. You're blind when I do miracles to take care of you. You ignore them. You're deaf and blind. In the next chapter, chapter 43, he said, let's convene an assembly of the gods. If they can produce one witness, we'll believe them. Of course, they can't. But he said, I will demonstrate my justice. Come forth, you deaf and blind people. And we begin to learn that it's not what we do for God, it's what God does through us. So he does get the glory. So right here, Moses is playing into this argument and using it against God. By your own strength, you brought them up. Okay? So the next part of his argument has to do with his character, and that is he is loving. Verse 17. Now may the Lord's strength be displayed, since you are strong. We know that because you're the one that brought us up out of Egypt. Now use that strength the right way. It's an incredible argument with God. Okay, just as you have declared. I love that. The Lord is slow to anger, abounding in love and kindness. Or that word love is the word chesed. Remember we talked about that a couple years ago? Everybody say it. Chesed. Chesed. That means that God cannot go back on his promises. He can't. He's not willing to go back. So, he's abounding in this chesed and forgiving sin and rebellion. Moses is reminding God of his own character, his promises. Yet he does not leave the guilty unpunished. Now, this is an interesting phrase coming up here because this actually is counter to the law. He punishes the children for the sin of the parents to the third and fourth generation. Okay, the law was very clear. The children will not be punished for the sin of the parents. But now he just said they will be. Okay, this begins to introduce part of this thorny little theology problems we have to work through. In accordance with your great love, forgive the sin of this people just as you have pardoned them from the time they left Egypt until now. So he's asking for God to forgive them. What happens? The Lord replied, I have forgiven them, just as you asked. If he forgave them and he loves them, why is he going to make them wander for 40 years? Why is he going to punish them? This introduces a real problem. It's dealt with extensively by Paul, this problem. The Corinthian epistles actually deal with this issue right here in this context, the desert. In Romans, he deals with it on a more theological term. Okay? What does this mean? If God forgives us, why would he do these? Why would he continue on these things? And then he goes on in verse 21. I have forgiven them, he says, but as surely as I live, and as surely as the glory of the Lord fills the whole earth. Or as David said in the Psalms, where can I go from your spirit? No place. No place. Not one of those who saw my glory and the signs I performed in Egypt and in the wilderness, but who disobeyed me and tested me 10 times, not one of them will ever see the land I promised on oath to their ancestors. No one who has treated me with contempt will ever see it. This lays the foundation for chapter 15, those who sin defiantly. You see, there was no sacrifice for those who sin out of rebellion. The sin sacrifice repeatedly says for those who sin unintentionally. So now we get to Hebrews. If we go on sinning willfully after receiving the full knowledge of the truth, there no longer remains a sacrifice. It comes right out of here. There is no sacrifice for rebellious sin, but a terrifying expectation of judgment is what Hebrews tells us. Do you know what that follows? That's the strongest warning passage in the New Testament. Do you know the verse before? Do not neglect gathering together with the saints. For if we go on sinning willfully and we don't regularly neglect, there no longer remains a sacrifice. It's worth thinking about. It's just worth thinking about. Okay? But in this context, it's raising issues that are going to get dealt with later on, because he has decided to forgive them, but they are still going to suffer the consequences. So he decides to let them have their own fate. They get to decide it. In chapter 28, he says, tell the Israelites, as surely as I live, declares the Lord, I will do the very thing I heard you say. In this wilderness, your bodies will fall. He said, why did God bring us out here to let us fall in the desert and die? Because you just described your own punishment. Okay? Just a good thing to remember, by the way. So, in the wilderness, your bodies will fall. Everyone of you 20 years old or more who has counted in the census, and who has grumbled against me, you're going to die. There is a line in the sand. 1 Corinthians, when we celebrate communion, okay, it says in 1 Corinthians 11 that a bunch of the Corinthians had already died because they were sinning against the Lord when it came to communion. They were stealing the food so the poor couldn't have it and eating the food. And he said, some of you have died and some of you have fallen sick because of your sin. That's why in James 5, when we bring the elders over to anoint you if you're really sick, some of you have been through that, we read James 5. Confess your sins to one another. Is there sin that you need to talk to us about? It's okay. This is safe. We're on your side. We're your friends. Is this sickness because of sin? Okay, now 99% of the time the answer is no, but sometimes it is. Okay? Sometimes it is. So, they get to decide their own fate. But then he goes on in verse 31. As for your children, that you said would be taken as plunder, okay, they bring up the children because, if we're destroyed, who's going to take care of the children? God says, I'll take care of them. I will bring them in to enjoy the land that you have rejected. But as for you, your bodies will fall in this wilderness. So Hebrews takes this passage and says, be very careful that you don't commit this kind of sin. Very careful. He gives strong warning. I only read one of them from Hebrews. I quoted it. There's 5 of them. Be very careful that you don't play this game with God. In other words, you got to decide. You're going to be faithful or not. You got to decide. This is an exercise in faith right here. And the reason why it's so important is because our church is about to embark on a different journey. Okay, I always knew this day would come. Didn't know if I'd make it, how long I'd make it here. I'm here 12 years. I knew it'd come. The original transition team, Kathy Joe was on it, Steve Hill was on it. They didn't know how long I would make it. My resume up until the time is I changed jobs every 5 years. And that was God doing it. It's not like I quit. I got booted out several times, Christian organizations, and he kept using that to promote me. Every time I got a new job, I got promoted. And so I thought maybe I'd stay 3 to 5 years. Tim Glasgow, I talked to him the other day about retiring, and he said, we didn't think you'd last very long at all, and here you are, 12 years, right? At the 5-year mark, Nancy and I went to the elders, and we said, every 5 years for our whole career, God has moved us. And here we are 5 years, and we're getting jittery. Our body clocks, we're so used to moving, we don't know what to do, but we need your help. Because now I have a whole church dependent on this. So I'm not looking for a pay raise, and I'm not looking for a job change, but I want you as elders to go answer the question, is this where I belong in the kingdom at Dillon Community Church? You guys have to decide that. I can't answer that question. Okay? God doesn't speak to me that clearly. It's time to leave, time to go. I mean, pastors do it all the time. Here's my letter of resignation. God has told me to go someplace else. I don't think that way. So I brought the elders into it, and I said, I want serious analysis. I want a serious discussion. So they came back and they said, we want you to stay. And I was already interviewing with other organizations at that time, other churches and organizations. And so I said, okay, tell me why. And they said, because the church is healthy now after 5 years. It wasn't healthy when I got here, and now it is. We really want to influence this county. We believe you're the one to help us. And I said, okay. Nancy and I said, okay. So I turned all the other interview processes down, said, we're staying here. Little did I know that right after that, Mark was going to have to leave for medical reasons, and that the pandemic was going to hit. And we went through some brutal years, didn't we? But we did it. We did it. So now we're through it, and we've shifted the course. We're doing a lot more event stuff. The Christmas Community Festival, the things that we're doing that are designed to get people to come in to us, come meet us. We're making changes. And so now, before too long, sometime in the next 6 months to a year, we're going to be making another change. And so we're right here where these people are. What does our faith look like? I can tell you have really good elders. I would die for them. That's how good they are. Okay? They know what they're doing. It's really good. So, forgiveness. When God says he forgives, then why is he punishing? You see, Moses had to wrestle with what's unchanging, what's changing about God's character. What is unchanging about his character is God's love. It's very real. Okay? It's very real. But what is changing about his character? His willingness to let them go on or not, his patience, the timeline. Just like you do with children when you raise them. Okay? Everyone, he has a limit of patience that doesn't go on for eternity. Not here on a broken world. You get to choose. You get to choose what you're going to be like. I can't look in your mirror. Only you can. I can only look in my mirror. You get to decide what type of person you're going to be. And whatever you decide dictates what our church is going to become. Are we going to be known as a church that's loving? Well, then guess what? You got to be loving. You got to quit complaining and being judgmental. Okay? Rarely do you ever hear me do this up front here. Okay? Jesus said in Luke 6, do not judge, do not condemn. I'm far more interested in drawing you closer to the Lord. Okay? That's my interest. That's my picture of you every Sunday. So he learned that God He has a timeline here. So he's pleading and interacting with God. You see, by saying that he will continue on for 40 years, God just made a serious commitment. It's far easier to destroy the nation and start over again. But by saying he will let them go for 40 years, he just made a commitment. He hasn't given up on them. He is committed to walking with them in their rebellion for the next 40 years. That's what that means. And so this lays the groundwork for Paul's arguments. Should we keep sinning? Because grace will be shown. And he said, no, not at all. There's something far better than grace. Grace is a product of the cross. But the product of walking by the Spirit and faithfulness is joy. What do you want? You get to decide. I can't decide for you. What do you want? If all you want is grace, go sing your hearts out. That's the cross. You'll never be happy. And these people we're going to learn in Numbers were never happy from this day on. They struggled with anger, bitterness, hostility, dissension all day long, but God never abandoned them. He let them choose. So when Paul gets into the argument, starts using the technical language around redemption, he has several different metaphors that he uses. But one of them is a relational metaphor where he says, if you think about how a couple that's having marital issues, they're estranged from one another. Okay? So the cross took care of it, and God turns back, and he forgives. You have been forgiven. Just like here. You've been forgiven. Okay? But that doesn't mean the other person has turned back. This is where your freedom comes into it. If you're in a marriage that's a disaster and your spouse decides to turn back in repentance, what are you going to do? Are you going to turn back? So God turns toward us. It's the imagery that's played out here in the desert and gets codified in Romans and Galatians and in the Corinthian epistles. What are you going to do? Forgiveness is not the answer. Relationship is. That's why Jesus can say in Matthew 7, on that day, many of you are going to say, didn't we prophesy in your name? Did we cast out demons in your name? Away from me, I never knew you. I never had a relationship with you. So just check your hearts for a moment. Are you happy with your relationship with the Lord? Is it just one of convenience? These are hard words, but they're necessary. Your relationship with the Lord, is it just status quo? Is he like a big dispenser of blessing? You just pray and hope God keeps you blessing? What is it? I just was given the news I have another surgery, a major one this time, and I have no options. If I want to live, I have to have it. They're very clear. Okay? I didn't ask for this. This is not what I wanted. Okay? But it's like, you know what my first thought of at this time in life? Okay, Lord. You're bigger than all this. That's fine. I'll walk. I'm in. I'll play the game. I'm in. Okay? You want me to have this surgery? I'll have it. It's okay. My life is changing. All right. It'll change. Okay? 2 of my doctors have said to me, with all the medical issues you're facing, you don't know most of them, we'll tell you some of them. With all the medical issues you're facing, we've never had a patient who just smiles and says, okay. Why? Because if the Lord wants to take me, he will find me. He knows exactly where I am, and I'm not going to worry about it. I got kingdom business to take care of. And this is what he's getting at here, okay? So this raises the question, he has forgiven, but he's not about to relent in what's going to happen to them. And this is where you see God's sovereignty stepping in a very active way, which will happen to some of you if you're not careful. Okay? Why? Because he loves you. Why do you punish children? Why do you discipline them? Because you love them. Okay? So, is a desert a punishment or an act of grace? It's kind of interesting when you read through it carefully. He talks about the fact that he wants them to learn about his grace. So out to the desert they go for 40 years. He removes them from the distractions of all the other nations. So these 40 years, they'll never see the other nations. They're alone now for the next 40 years. It gives him more time to show mercy for them, gives them patience, gives them time. 40 years is a long time. It gives them time to repent and turn back and experience the best of what God has. And we're going to find out they won't do that. They never do. It gives time, it gives the people ample time to make these decisions about who this God really is. And these are hard lessons that are coming ahead of us. Right after that, they start complaining about and rebelling about everything. And that shows you where their true heart is. So when Jesus says, you can tell people by their fruit, you can tell me all day long, you can't judge me on whether I'm a Christian or not. No, I can't, but I can sure do this. Everyone will know that you're my disciple if you have love for one another. If you're complaining and grumbling, I have a pretty good idea that you're pretty far away from the Lord. That's what I know. Okay, only He knows where you are. And then finally, it gives them a chance to train up the next generation. This is where the whole thing of He punishes the next generation, okay? Because the law forbade, you could not punish the children for the sin of the fathers, the parents. So what this is saying is that and this gets reversed, this is explained in Deuteronomy, that when you live a life of sin, it gets transported into the life of your children, and they live the same life. Okay? That's a common thing that's well known. And so they will pay the price unless they act differently and take a different route. So now we have two generations living together simultaneously in the desert. One is trying to show them grace and give them patience to repent and turn, and the other one, don't be like this one. And that's the story of Micah. To the southern kingdom, the Assyrians had destroyed the northern kingdom. And he says under Hezekiah, don't be like the northern kingdom. Turn from your evil ways and trust the Lord. So now, for 40 years, we have two generations side by side. And if you study Caleb's the one that has the right to complain. He has to wander for 40 years. Does he complain? No. When you look into Joshua, the book of Joshua, and Deuteronomy, what you find is he's faithful as can be. And not only that, he's raised up faithful people, the next generation. I think what he did was he goes, dang it, out to the desert for 40 years. So I better get busy in the kingdom, training up the next generation. Because the next generation, without training, is going to follow in the footsteps of their parents. That's a pattern we see repeated in the Bible. So this 40 years gives them that opportunity to move like this. That's forgiveness. You are forgiven. What are you going to do about it? Father, thank you for this incredible story. Thank you, first of all, Lord, for forgiving us. Thank you for giving us opportunities, Lord, throughout life, daily, to make decisions, to follow you because we want to, and we love you. So grateful for that. In Jesus' name.